Hey songwriters, welcome back to another video here at Home Songwriting. This video is all about writing bridges. You want to talk about writing bridges? We're going to talk about writing bridges. So this is a live recording of one of our online workshops. If you want to attend these in person, there are parts of the workshops that we can't post online because we use some listening examples of songs that we can't post on YouTube. So if you would like to join live and get the full effect, and you can interact with us, which is the best part, the link is in the description. But let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into the workshop. Let's go. So just to review, our past workshops were about verses and choruses. And for those of you who are new, you'll probably want to watch these on the YouTube channel at homesongwriting.com. Because it will get you much deeper understanding. But verses are really developmental sections in songs. They help to set up the situation. They establish the who, the when, the where, and they give context to the emotional part of the song, which is the chorus. So your chorus is where a lot of times your hook lives. So it's really the main central idea of the song. And it basically tells the listener why the verses that you just told them matter. So it's really what the song is about. Now, your bridge, when that comes along, the bridge, kind of like in real life, a bridge takes us somewhere, right? Usually we use a bridge to cross over something, or we're going somewhere. That's what a bridge does in a song as well. It takes you somewhere new. And it expands on the ideas that you've already established in previous sections of the song. So we're going to talk about what that can look like. So what is a bridge? So a bridge is really a section that contrasts with the verse and the chorus. Sometimes it's called a B section. It takes the song somewhere new. And it's really there to give your listener a break from hearing things they've already heard before. So in a verse chorus song, just like As It Was, by the time we get to a bridge section, we've already heard the verse twice, we've already heard the chorus twice. So there's that rule of two that we've talked about before, that if you've done something twice, don't do it again until you've done something different. And that's where the bridge section really comes in. So it's an opportunity to go from what we've already heard, take us somewhere new, and then bring us back to what we've already heard. So it sounds like coming home, and we get that rush of like, oh, it feels comfortable again, right? So your bridge is really that opportunity to introduce contrast. And you're going to hear the word contrast a lot, because that's how you write bridges, is you look at what you already have, and then you try to do something completely different. I know a lot of people ask, like, I don't know what to write in my bridges. I just have a hard time with them. I actually like writing bridges because I don't have to really do what I've already done. I can just kind of go somewhere different and experiment a little bit. From a content standpoint, a bridge, sometimes a good way to think about what sort of lyrical content you have is, where do we go from here, or what comes next? Or it's like, or you could think of it as like a summary too, or to summarize the thought process. And again, contrast should come in as many ways as possible. So that's lyrical contrast, it's melodic contrast, it's chord and harmonic contrast, and then also contrast in the groove and the rhythms as well. So sometimes a bridge also can act like another verse in the advancement of the story. So it can advance the who, the when, and the where, like we've talked about. But again, it should sound different than the verses and the choruses. And again, the key word here is bridges take us somewhere new. So when you're writing and you're like, oh, now I have to write my bridge, just in your mind, think, where do I go that's new? Bridges also, like I mentioned, can provide an opportunity to summarize or highlight the main idea of the song. But again, it's usually done in a different way than the chorus. So sometimes you might approach writing a bridge as saying, what am I saying in my chorus, and how can I say it in a different way to still make the point to my listener? So give them the same content, but in a different structure, a different um, like different lyrics, different melody, different chords, all of that. Again, verses are developmental. Your choruses are very central, and the bridges are kind of a mix of developmental and summarizing, because it's really in your song, a lot of times a bridge is your last chance to introduce new or build on information, because most of the time, by the time you hit a bridge, the song is probably closer to the end than it is the beginning, usually. So a lot of times it helps to give that last, oomph of what sort of emotion or idea that you're trying to communicate. And you don't always need to write a bridge. So lots of songs don't have bridges, but they have something else. So some bridge alternatives that you can think about, depending on what type of song you're doing, you may be able to do an instrument solo, or maybe if it's like dance music, you could have more of a dance break. You could also repeat a pre-chorus if your song has a pre-chorus, using some different production or different effects. You could also do what's called a drop chorus, which is where it's basically one of the choruses, but you cut out some instruments or cut out some vocal parts, so you make it kind of sound different or change the energy. So you're still creating contrast, but the section is still a chorus. You could also repeat a verse in a new way. I've seen some songs where they actually repeat the first verse, but they do it with a different melody, they do it with different chords. And sometimes you can just do a short little musical turnaround, or just have the music of maybe one of the other sections play before going back to a chorus. So there are some options if you don't want to necessarily write a lyrical bridge. And that's the thing about bridges, is if you feel like your song is saying what you need to say, then you don't necessarily have to add more just to add more, if that makes sense. Um, and that's kind of why a lot of songs now are getting shorter, is because a lot of songs are cutting out, or they're making shorter bridges as well. So to kind of summarize bridges, there's lyrical contrast, or there should be lyrical contrast. There should be melodic contrast. You should try to use different chords to create that form of contrast. You can change the groove, the production. Again, take your listener somewhere new, and it can a lot of times be the climax of the song as well. Like it can sometimes be the high point that it leads up to. Think about like Whitney Houston ballads, right? A lot of times the bridge is where it goes up to that money note where she belts it and kind of goes out of the song, right? The bridge can also be used to build tension and then bring some release when the chorus comes back. And the bridge again can be shorter than other sections, and not always needed as well. So now let's get into listening to some songs. And I tried to pick songs today by artists that we haven't necessarily listened to before. There is one artist that we have listened to before, but I think the song has a good example. But I wanted to pull songs that were not the usual ones that we listen to. So we're going to start off going back with a Stevie Wonder song. So I want you to pay attention to what you feel as the bridge. And again, learning to feel what the bridge is, you should be able to pay attention to the structure a little bit, and knowing that your bridge is where a lot of contrast happens. See if you can spot where this song has a bridge, and then we'll come talk about it. So this is called Creepin' by Stevie Wonder. What did you spot about where there were like the bridge sections? Han says that one gives him Steely Dan vibes. Cool. Anybody have thoughts on the structure and the way that it was set up? Ron.
Yeah, I was just noticing the contrast from the long drawn out vocals to the choppy vocals. That was pretty cool. Um, the contrast or the bridge to me, I don't know if I hit it right or not, but it says when I am sleeping at night, where that comes in, it looked like the melody changed. Then it went into the solo, and then it came out with that same chord progression. So it was almost like it's a bridge instrumental back into the bridge before it went into the chorus. I don't know if I
Yes.
caught that, but
Yeah, so this song is actually, to me, I hear it as verse, verse, bridge, verse, bridge, then it does like a solo, and then it goes back to a verse, and then it like does like the chorus again. Like, so it's, or not chorus, but like the bridge. It's kind of like a bridge chorus.
yeah.
So to me, it's an extension of the AABA structure. Because it's like a verse, the da 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 dun, 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 dun. Those to me are the verses, and then it gets to the chords change, and it like opens up to the when I sleep at night. That's the bridge to me. And
Yeah.
I saw that CJ kind of said that too, and Anubhav thought that was that it, and then he said it came again. And yeah, I think this song he actually repeats the bridge, because he breaks it up with a solo in there. He also has some other verses and things too. But Ron, I think you're on the right track. This was a very complicated song for sure. Awesome. Anybody else have any thoughts on that one? Um, and then Anubhav says, never heard of songs which repeat the bridge. Yeah. So a lot of times you may not hear a lot of the big songs or the hit songs do that a lot, because a lot of times there's not enough time because they're usually writing for radio. But a lot of times in more I would say older songs and more album cuts, when people were making more musical albums, I think there are a lot of songs that have extended structure for sure. Jay.
I found it really interesting hearing the breakdown and the last analysis because as you mesh the instrumentation and the phasing of the synths coming in and how dreamlike it is and the instability of emotions when it comes to love and dreams and how much just kind of gets lost in the wash, having that inconsistent drum pattern kind of as it comes in matches that feel the doubling of the bridge. And I feel like it gives it more inconsistent. I don't want to say inconsistent, but more fluid structure that's undefined, and it kind of like the tides in that video that they overlaid, just kind of ebbs and flows. It's not decided.
Yeah. So I think what you're picking up on, Jay, is like the prosody with what it's saying, right? Like the song's called Creepin'. If you imagine someone creeping through the dark, they're probably going to be a little like kind of, smooth and stealthy. And that's kind of the mysterious way that the chords work, and just the rhythm itself kind of has that almost like a sneaky shuffle kind of feel. And that's an example of prosody where the structure helps to communicate the lyrical content. So it's that marriage of music and words, which I think is what Jay was picking up on for
It's a
sure.
great example.
So the next song we're going to listen to is a song by an artist that I've grown to like over the years, and I really like this song. It's a song by Troye Sivan, and this is a kind of a pop, more modern song. It's called My." But listen to where you may feel the structure of this one and kind of how they build. I'd love to hear your take on how they build contrast when we get to the bridge. So this is Troye Sivan, My." All right. So I know that wasn't CJ's favorite, but what did you guys think about that one? Where did the I saw Adam, you were making kind of the stank face. Did you like that one?
Yeah, that was my like I call that my Zeppelin face or my Joe Walsh face, you know.
Cool. Um, did you guys sense where the bridge was? CJ says the breakdown. Yep. Yep. It was the part where I don't remember the exact lyrics, but it sort of broke down and then it talked about treasure. Because it repeated the chorus twice actually after the second verse, and then it kind of restated the hook line, and then it kind of like the four on the floor kind of went away. The dance beat kind of went away, and then it was where the bridge was. So that song is kind of a verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, chorus, bridge, and then chorus. So it actually repeats the chorus in there as well. Ron, you had your hand raised.
Oh, just to reinforce what you were saying. Yeah, I didn't remember the lyrics for the bridge, but certainly you can see the difference, with the different line lengths that he was singing, and the words were longer and drawn out as opposed to the short, choppy in the verse and the chorus.
Yeah, sort of the emotion in the way that he was singing changed as well.
Yeah, definitely a good song.
Yeah, and it definitely, I think CJ said make it stop in the chat. It's definitely a pop song. It definitely has that four on the floor because it's more of probably for that type of genre where it's very production based. But I do think for a production based song, I do think it has some interesting lyrical content as well, saying like I die every night with you. Like I think it's deeper than what some songs say, which is really cool. Amy says it was a short bridge, but different rhythm and 2-syllable words at the end. Absolutely. And that's what we had talked about before, is it's all about that contrast where it's giving us that break from what we've already heard in order to bring it back. And then it brings us back into that. In this instance, it's bringing us back into a groove or sort of that feeling. It brought Adam Stankface back, which was great. I'm going to go back and share my screen, and let's listen to another one. So this one, we're going to actually do a little bit of neo soul, this is a song called Steady Love by India Ari. So listen to the structure on this one, and then we'll talk about your impressions on. Listen for things that we've talked about before too, like how do they establish the who, the when, the where, how do they advance it? How do they tie it all together? So this is called Steady Love. So what did you all think of that one? Leslie's clapping. I saw a lot of heads bopping and a lot of smiles at some of the words too. Dale has a heart. Awesome. I saw some people in the chat said they kind of lost the structure, probably because you were feeling it. You were kind of grooving a little bit. What I think is interesting about this one is it kind of starts with that. I would call it more of like a post chorus, like the ooh so steady, where it's just an ooh and then the title. That was kind of a post chorus, and it actually started the song with that, right? So it had that kind of post chorusy hook before it even got to the first verse, and then it was verse, chorus, post chorus, verse, chorus, post chorus, and then it went to the bridge, which that's where it got the chords changed, and then it got very like syncopated and kind of sassy with like the delivery, which was different than the smooth way that the rest of it was flowing, right? So really a cool song, and India has such a great voice too. Like her songs are amazing. JP says that song was sick. I don't know you can add a post verse after a bridge and then a final chorus was different from the choruses. Yeah. Amy said the bridge has more words emphasized per line, whereas the verse chorus had a single of 2 words emphasized. Absolutely. Yeah. So there again, it's that contrast. So when you're thinking about what do I want to do for my bridge, the best thing to do is take an inventory of what you already have. And what you already have then can help you determine where do I go different. It's this versus that. So when people say, I don't know where to go with the bridge, the answer is always like, well, try to do something different than you've already done. Dan said it felt like lost the groove in the bridge a little bit. But yeah, interesting structure and again, a different genre, but still using kind of the same structure, the same concepts. And I think that's what you will see is regardless of the type of song we're listening to, the tools are all the same. You know, there's always a number of lines, there's always a rhyme scheme, there's always, you know, a rhythm to the lines, there's always a rhyme type, there's all those things that we talk about all the time. The genre of that song is neo soul. So like neo soul is like India Arie, Erica Badu, a lot of other artists that fall within that genre. Awesome. Well, let's go to the next song that I have selected. This one is by Tyler Childers. And Tyler is more, this song would be considered to be more in kind of the Americana country kind of genre. Sometimes they call it Appalachian country, but I would say it's probably more Americana. But check out this song called All Yorn. So what were your thoughts on that one? I see that Hans said he really digs the production of the song, and there was the drop chorus. Hans also said key change. Deborah says verse, verse, chorus, bridge, verse, verse, bridge, chorus. I hear it more as verse, chorus, a little turnaround, and then there's a verse, chorus, kind of a little musical break, and then kind of a bridge and drop chorus section that repeats the chorus out. But anybody else have observations on that song? Not only about the bridge, but just in general? Yeah, Tyler Childers has a lot of really great songs. JP says cool rhyme scheme on the verses. Absolutely. It's a unique the way that he ends some of the lines are definitely unique. Like he adds a couple syllables where you least expect it, which I kind of like because it keeps you interested a little bit in there. Yeah, so definitely check out some of his music as well. That one kind of had that kind of a soul kind of a sound to it as well. It had that kind of retro kind of shuffle feel going on. Is it Sadia said she didn't really like how he sung verse 1. Absolutely. So yeah, so the key here is when you're on your own too, I think when you get stuck in your own writing, it's always good to listen to other genres and listen to songs that you normally don't listen to, because I think you'll see that there's a whole bunch of options that you have and a whole world of music out there that you may not access all the time. So it's definitely good to listen. I have one more song that we're going to listen to, and this is a song that I've really been listening to a lot lately. It's by a little known artist by the name of Taylor Swift. I know not very many people have heard of her. But I find this song to be pretty cool, the way that she phrases it, and then also listen to how it goes in the bridge. This is from her new album. It's my favorite song on there. It's called Lavender Haze. Awesome. Somebody in the chat, Sadia says, feels like she's in a smoky club, or they're in a smoky club, that the music complements the lyrics. Yeah, I think that's what it feels like to me too. I think the lavender haze, I almost wonder if it's supposed to be like pot smoke to me. You know, there was the whole Hendrix purple haze thing and all of that stuff. But Jay said the bridge is the go viral part. That's what I hear as the bridge kind of too, where it talks about love spiral and going viral. Dale said it's an interesting pre-chorus pickup. Absolutely, there is a pre-chorus in that song. Han says the drum feels reminiscent of Phil Collins in the air tonight. Yeah, that kind of big like, and then it heads into the chorus. Absolutely. Anubab says kind of a mix of progressive house, lo-fi, and pop. Yeah, kind of that. I don't know if they call it like dark pop or like something like that as well. But yeah, definitely a cool song. Any other thoughts on that one? All right, so that kind of wraps up the bridge writing section of our workshop today. But next we're going to talk about rewriting. So we want to definitely give you some tips on how you can look at how to like look at your songs and kind of make them better. But before we do that, how do you feel like you will take what we talked about so far and put it to use in your own songs? Like, how can you see yourself leaving today And when you go to sit down to write something new, what do you see yourself using from what we've talked about already? Thinking about listening to them again, absolutely, that's a good idea, for sure. Says it would be cool to go over badly written songs. I Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard to it's hard to go over badly written songs. I mean, I guess we could look at my songs, but um, but yeah, definitely listening to these again is good. Ron, you had your hand raised.
But yeah, I mean, I've heard it before, and I don't think I do it enough. But contrast, we're emphasizing contrast, and got to keep beating it in my head, contrasting my songs. And I think this class will help me write better bridges. Again, contrasting in there. And I like the comment that you said, the more change, the better. I like that. Or the more contrast, the better. And one thing that I don't think we taught, but I did pick up, and you probably saw me smiling at some of the lyrics. I struggle sometimes in trying to take a concept that I want to say and making it and putting it into a song in an interesting fashion. Like the song King in the Sheets. And there was a couple of other lyrics that I saw that, wow, I would have never thought to use those types of words. So probably going forward, I'm probably going to make a daily practice to listen at least to 1 to 2 songs, look at the lyrics. And, it's not stealing a song if you borrow the concept of King of the Sheets and rearrange it and put it in a different song. So those are the 3 takeaways that I think I have from today.
Yeah, and no, Ron, so the upcoming workshops that we're going to be doing are actually writing workshops. I think it might be the very first one that we're doing in January is actually turning emotions into images. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about, Ron, and practicing is how do you take what you want to say and how do you then put that into lyrics and images that you can pull someone into, right? Like that's the way that you write songs that are not cliche, right? The more images you can have in your song, the less cliche it will be because it gives your listener something to tap into. And I think if you listen to a lot of Taylor Swift songs, that's what she's really good at, is she's really good at throwing in a couple of lines that creates an image and it gives the emotion something to hang on, right? Like she's giving you the picture and then how to feel about it afterward. And I think that's deliberate on her part. I mean, she's studied in Nashville with a lot of hit songwriters. And that's something that pro writers do all the time is you want to put the furniture in the room before you put the people in it, right? So that's the way that they think about that stuff. But yeah, so definitely for those of you who want to explore that more, we're going to be talking about turning emotions into images coming up in one of the future workshops. So be sure to check that out. Amy says one question is finds that tends to put a pre-chorus bridge in most of her songs. Any tips on when this isn't the best idea? Yeah, I mean, kind of what Adam just said, you don't necessarily need those things. There's a couple reasons why you would do it, and Adam kind of hit on it. One is it provides contrast, right? Like if your verse is very similar to your chorus, adding a pre-chorus in between can be a nice way to give your listener a break and sort of ramp up into the chorus again. And then another reason why you would add a pre-chorus is if, like, content-wise, if your song doesn't quite make sense going from the verse to the chorus, like there's still something missing just from a making sense perspective, a pre-chorus can sometimes help summarize the verse, but then also set up the chorus a little bit more than it would do just jumping from chorus or verse to chorus, if that makes sense. So Adam's right. Those are the reasons why you would look at a pre-chorus. Absolutely. Any other thoughts or comments? Jay said message, scene, reinforcement. Chorus and verse can have the same chord progression. Absolutely, they can have the same chord progression. anytime you have something that is the same between like a verse and a chorus, like that part of the song, parts of the song can be the same to kind of keep some consistency and just an overall kind of feel. But that means if your chords are the same, you'll want your melody to be different. You want your lyrical structure to be different. You want some of the rhythms to be different. So that way you add the contrast. Again, prosody and contrast are like your best friends when you're thinking about writing. You know, how does the prosody is how does the structure support what I want to say? So that's how do the tools, how am I setting this up? Does that give the right message? And we're going to do an exercise workshop on this coming up, I think in February as well, talking about using structure to deliver emotion. So you want to join us for that one too. But then you have the prosody, and then the contrast is really to keep your listener interested. So they're not hearing the same thing over and over again and tuning out. You want to give them that tension and release. So this is once you have a draft, or maybe you have part of a song written and you start to go back and you want to do rewriting. Rewriting is really just another word for editing. You know, so when I would hear people say writing is rewriting, I would always think like you're redoing it. You're always like having to like scrap it and go back, but that's really not what rewriting is. So we're going to give you some tips on how to focus on that. So rewriting is really about refining and editing before you are actually ready to put your song out. And that putting your song out might mean just performing it for someone. It may be posting it on social media. It may be putting it out through the distribution sites, whatever that means, to where you're ready to present it to someone else. The thing is too, is not everything has to be rewritten. And I think some people don't trust themselves enough to leave some stuff alone. You know, if something isn't working, then change it. But if it's working, you don't necessarily need to rewrite it. And like I said earlier, it's not about having the exact perfect words and having it flowery, and like, it's about, does it communicate the emotion that you want it to communicate in the context of the rest of what's happening within the song? If you go back and if we read some of the lyrics of other songs, you will find that they're not very complicated and they're very conversational, because songs are almost like if you were standing next to someone and just talking to them, or you're writing a letter to them. It's what you would say and how you would explain a situation to another person. So the key with rewriting is to try to train yourself to spot when things aren't working or if they bug you. So the bugging you thing is your little rewrite meter, where it's like if something just doesn't feel right, that's when you may want to look at something. But again, you have to be careful to not over rewrite, because sometimes you can rewrite your song to death and it loses what it had originally. And don't be afraid to give your song some space. You know, if it's not coming together right now, like let it go. And you'll either come back to it because you like it, or you'll move on and forget about it, which tells you a lot. So that's kind of the first introduction to rewriting here. Some of the common things to look for as you're reviewing your songs, you know, look to make sure that you're not doing too much telling and not enough showing. And what we mean by that is telling is where you're talking about the emotions, but you're not showing us that emotion. So you're telling someone that you're sad or you're feeling some sort of emotion, but you're not showing us. And the way that listeners get pulled into a song is when they're shown something more so than told. So make sure that you have a mix of telling and showing. Also, one of the common mistakes that people make is your verses are all saying the same thing and your story isn't advancing. So your verses sometimes might have different words, but the overall thing that it's saying is exactly the same as the first verse. And that gets really boring for your listener and it doesn't advance the story. So watch out for that. Also, here's contrast again. Watch for contrast between song sections. If there's not enough contrast, you may want to rework some of the sections to add more contrast. Also, be careful not to overuse perfect rhyme. We've done workshops on rhyme types, so make sure that you are experimenting with different rhyme types, different rhyme schemes, all of those things. Also, watch out for language that is not conversational, right? So when we talk to each other, we just speak how we speak. We don't sort of embellish a lot with a lot of poetic language. We don't use a lot of overly complicated adjectives or adverbs. So when you write your songs, make sure that your language is conversational and your listener can relate to it. If you wouldn't say it to someone in everyday like conversation, it's probably not working in your song. Also, look for melodies that don't have motif. And what we mean by motif is a recognizable or repeatable or memorable pattern. Make sure that your melodies have something that you can basically hum back or still hear when the music's not playing. Also, a big mistake that a lot of songwriters make is they don't have their verses match melodically. Verses really should be pretty close to each other from a melodic standpoint, so your listener knows that they're in a verse when it comes back around. As you can see in the songs that we listened to today, there's a little bit of variation, but you still knew when we got back to a verse because the melody was the same and the chords were the same, but what changed were the lyric. Also, a lot of times we make the mistake of relying too much on a chorus to save our song. You know, I hear people say, well, the chorus is what people remember anyway, so the bridge is kind of, or the verse is kind of throwaway. And it's like, yeah, but we don't just listen to choruses, and your chorus can mean more if you write a good verse. So don't rely too much on the chorus to save your song. Also, watch for point of view issues or tense issues. So make sure that you are, if you're starting in first person, unless you explain why you're changing point of view, you'll want to kind of stay consistent throughout the song. Same way with tense. If you're talking about the past, unless you add words that then bring us to another time, tense issues will stand out and confuse your listener. And anytime your listener gets confused, it means they're thinking and they're not feeling your song, and you've lost them. The best songs are songs that we don't even think about, we just feel it. Like some of you said you got lost in the India Ari song and you didn't even know where the structure was. That song was working, right? So that's what you're trying to get across to your listener. Also, be conscious of trying to say too much. You know, I hear people saying that, you know, 2 verses isn't enough time to say what I want to put in my song. If your idea or concept won't fit in 2 verses, you're probably saying too much. The best songs usually are making one singular point about one period of time. So it's usually about an event or situation and kind of the emotion around that. So be sure you're not trying to say too much. Also, try to use rhyme scheme to give some guideposts to your listener as well. Sometimes if you don't have rhyme schemes, that can lose your listener. In the chat says, Amy says, the other thing I found helpful is to try to think about what is the very basic idea I'm trying to communicate. Absolutely. Do all my metaphors and words support that? Sometimes I try to say something in a cool way, but it isn't as directly related to the main idea, and then save it for another song. Yes, totally. Like that's exactly a great way to think. Ron, you have your hand raised.
Just a quick question on rhyme scheme. Would you say it's a good thing to keep your rhyme schemes consistent throughout the verses for consistency, or would you suggest changing them for contrast?
The verses should be the same, but other sections, besides the verse, you should try to contrast it.
So use
So
the same scheme for verse 1, verse 2, and verse 3.
correct.
Okay.
Yep. So the thing that should be changing in your verses is really the lyrics, right? Everything else is kind of the same.
Yeah.
And your choruses, most of the time, choruses are going to, everything stays the same because you want people to hear that the most often. And that's how they become able to sing that the most. Awesome. Good question, Ron. Other questions to ask yourself while you're reviewing your songs. Does the first verse set up a who, when, and a where, or at least two of those three? A lot of times those things are going to be guideposts that help put your listener into, whoops, not sure why I did that. It will put your listener into the scene if you are giving them that who, when, and the where, because it's kind of like when you read a news story, you kind of want to get the sense of what's happening as soon as possible. And setting that up early is very, very important. We already talked about point of view, tense, the contrasting rhyme schemes. Do we use different types of rhymes? We already talked about, not always using perfect. Are the lyrics conversational? One thing to watch for is, does your melody build energy as the song progresses? And one way to build energy and sort of build that tension and release is to think about your verse a lot of times as the floor melodically. And then like your pre-chorus might go up a little bit in pitch, the chorus is up a little bit more, and then maybe the bridge goes up more. You're kind of building that energy for your listener. Also, the chorus is the main idea, the why everything else is being said. So to what Amy's point was she wants everything to lead to the chorus. And that's exactly what makes it that central idea of the song. So is the chorus summarizing everything else that you've already said? What we've already talked about, do the verses match? Do they have the same melody? Do your choruses have the same melody and lyrics? I personally, it's a pet peeve when people change their chorus lyrics. I think if you're changing the chorus lyrics, it's not technically a chorus. It's some other section that's not a chorus. Also, can you sing or hum the melodies without any music? If you can't sing your melodies without music, your melody might not be that strong. Also, this is huge. After you write your song, read it out loud like it's prose. Does it make sense? And can you feel rhythmic contrast between the sections? If you read your lyrics and they don't really make sense, or you wouldn't really speak it that way, then you can go back and rewrite then. Also, I think as you heard in the songs we listened to today, the title is usually pretty obvious in songs. You pretty much know what the title is. Is your title obvious? Look for that. Does your music support what you're trying to say? Is there that prosody? And then does the song keep your interest as you listen as well? Things that you can also look out for is, can you replace verbs? Looking at the verbs and seeing if there's, like in a thesaurus, you can pull up the verbs and see if there's a more interesting way to say things. Do you have any lines that kind of take the energy out of what you're saying? I would call those filler lines. Does your song sound cliche? Like, does it sound like something that's already been written? Does it sound forced? And is there a pleasant sense of familiarity in the chord progression and also the harmonic rhythm? And that's another way to say, does your chord progression feel good? Does it feel like it moves and feel like it makes sense? Also, again, does your song have that mix of showing and telling? And one thing that's very telling about what you want to rewrite is play your song for someone else and pay attention to how they respond, but also pay attention to how you feel internally, because there will be parts of the song where you kind of cringe. And if you're cringing when you're playing that song for someone else, that is a good sign that you probably want to work on that section. So that's really the rewriting part. are those helpful for you as you think about, going forward and working on your own songs? How do you see this all working in your own writing going forward? Han says absolutely. Awesome. Cool. So this is the time where we kind of open things up for, open discussion, and I see that there's conversation going on in the chat that I've missed some of it, but do any of you have tips that maybe this conversation sparked for you that you want to share with the others, or any thoughts that you want to share as we go through today?
Yeah, Chad. Thanks.
Alana, yeah, go for it. I saw Adam, you unmuted too, but we'll go to Adam next.
So one tip I would share, because I'm a poet at heart, is to read a lot of poetry. And if you can, try to write poetry as well. But again, like Chad said, when you're writing your songs, stick to making it as conversational as possible while still showing and telling. And the showing and telling really, I think the heart of it, is poetry.
Yeah, I think poetry and so lyrics and poetry, very similar. I think rhythm and structure has a different job within lyric though, because you're actually trying to match it to a melody, whereas in poetry you have a little bit more freedom, but the concept is definitely the same for sure. And I think what Alana said is reading poetry can help you get a sense of that lyrical rhythm and how people speak. And I think not only read poetry, but read song lyrics that you've never heard the song. Because if you read lyrics, I think you'll find that they're not as complicated as we make them. Because I think our minds, when we hear songs married, like lyrics married to music, it gives us a sense that things are more complicated than they are. So definitely look at songs that you don't know. Emily, you have your hand raised.
One of the things that you had said earlier about rewriting was to kind of don't just keep working the song and keep working the song and keep working the song, but to give it a rest and try again. And I did that recently with a song I had started writing in like 2018 or something like that, and I was able to come back and rework it and actually complete it, and because I had a fragment of a song but I didn't have the completed song, and I was able to complete it and actually come up with something that felt much better than what I had been struggling with. So yeah, it can be really important to give something time to let it rest, because sometimes like our subconscious is working on things all the time. So even if we're not actively working on a song, our mind can still be doing it at the same time.
Yeah. Well, the subconscious thing too, it's really easy when we're writing to see a picture in our head and we think we're communicating it very clearly because we're thinking it so clearly. Sometimes putting what you've written aside, when you come back to it, you realize like, I wasn't saying at all of what I wanted to say. So sometimes taking a break is definitely good. I want to comment on something that Rayra said in the chat. Said, I think the more we read these principles, the better we get at learning the rules at heart and apply these principles in our songwriting. As while we're writing and we have to think about these rules, the section doesn't flow natural while expressing our own truth. So I think what's being said is sometimes when you're stuck in the structure, you can maybe not be as creative, and that's not the concept of what these things are. I think you never want to stop the flow of creativity when it's happening, and I think you want to be as open and write as creatively and as freely as you can. But ultimately, the tools come into play when you go into that editor mode, and when you're massaging it into something final. That's where you start to whittle it down to fitting into a structure. Because whether we like it or not, our listeners are trained to hear songs in a certain structure, and they equate structure with something being good, right? It's the same with like building houses or cooking. Like if you went to a restaurant and the chef was like, I'm just going to throw whatever I want into the pan and I'm just going to throw it on a plate and then you have to eat it. That's what I think some people are trying to do with their songwriting, where they're like, I just want to be creative and put out my feelings. Well, your end user is expecting a little bit of presentation, right? They want to have the food separated on the plate. It has to look nice. They have to, it's what they're used to. That's the same with music, where our listeners are listening to the Taylor Swifts, they're listening to the Stevie Wonders, they're listening to all these things that are our competition. That's the bar, right? If you're just doing creative stuff, a lot of times your listener will not hear it as meeting the bar, even though you are being very creative, if that makes sense. So I think writing as freely as you can in the beginning is a great way to start, but then use these as a tool to whittle down as well. Jay, you have your hand raised.
Thanks, Chad. And again, thank you for hosting these. Really appreciate it. And I learned so much every time I come to participate. I think for me, everyone who I've engaged with seem to learn more as they go along. And I think part of it is like what I'm going to call the twin C's: context and community. And you were talking about before the meeting started, rereading books. And I feel as though kind of like that, along with what Ryra just said, trying to do things as you're practicing it and learning it at the same time don't necessarily work or jive, because it's not a step-by-step guide. It is an intuitive process, which it demands creativity, and to try to be creative while it's just kind of like staring at a map while driving down the road. I mean, you can try it, but it's not probably ill-advised. And part of that, I feel, is also learning language, vocabulary, which can be absolutely counter in what we say in spoken language versus application in an art or a craft. Just the language may ironically be different. And so the other C, I would say, is community. Not being afraid to ask for help, not being afraid to reach out and ask what these things mean. Because if we don't understand and we're trying to just hide our hubris and just pry through it, not understanding is just going to beat our heads against the wall, where we can actually ask, hey, can I get some feedback? Hey, what does this mean? Hey, yada, 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 yada. And at the end of the day, finding people who you really engage with and are able to grow with as we all gain greater context and map our way forward, I feel is a holistic growth path.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Jay, about it being it's more of a process and it's something that's ongoing. I think, I saw some questions in the chat and we were listening and I was trying to read everything what people were saying, and people were saying, well, we should do workshops on this or that. And some of those things, like writing a draft of a lyric, we've done workshops on that before. We'll definitely do those again. You're not going to learn everything about songwriting from sitting in a 2-hour workshop. And I'm not going to be able to teach you everything unless you're doing it on your own, because I think with songwriting, you're truly not, you're learning the theory, you're learning the concept, but the application comes from just jumping in and trying stuff, like, because people will say, well, what chords do I use to make it sound sad? Well, I mean, I don't have an answer to that, right? Like, how do you imagine, what does sadness sound like? Do you know what I mean? Like, and unless you're going and playing chords and saying, what do I feel when I play that? You'll never build up that vocabulary of how to communicate. Because all of these tools, as Jay said, it's like learning a language. We're learning how to write emotion with lyrics, melody, chords, groove. Like, all of those things are ultra complicated. And yes, we all listen to tons of music, but when you start to learn the craft, you move from being just a like an observer to being someone who can actually use those tools in a good way. And I'll be honest, once you start learning some of this stuff, the songs you used to like won't seem that great sometimes. And it does take the magic out of it. And I think that's something that you need to be prepared for too, because when you're writing, you're not always going to hear things the way that you hear other people's work, because you're a lot of times we equate other people's work with the context where we heard the song, right? Like there's songs that remind us when we're kids. Does that mean that that song was actually really good, or are we just remembering what we were feeling at that time? Do you know what I mean? So there's all these things that go into it. That's why it's just, you'd never stop learning. Adam, you have your hand raised.
Thanks. I wanted to talk more about rewriting. I have this work in progress. I've been compiling and editing it, pun intended, for years. This checklist of rewriting. I'll email it to anyone if they want it. digitalfatigue@gmail.com. And there were some things you mentioned, Chad, that I like the way you put them, that weren't necessarily on my list here. But some of the other things, some of the biggest things that I look at is I try and narrow down a song to one emotion. I know it's sometimes it sounds like it's oversimplified it, but I feel like some of the most effective songs, like for example, you all know the song, the Louis Capaldi, Someone You Loved, right? Most of you know that song. That dude is hammering desperation, hammering it. And that song was originally inspired by the death of his grandmother. But when you hear that song, it's more like a breakup song. But the desperation is just so evident. Things like that. I'm just going to scan through this to kind of contribute to the discussion. Another thing I always consider is like, how does the song portray the protagonist, the singer? Like if you're singing about, if you come across as an asshole, you probably should sing about the asshole and not be the asshole. So that's a big thing with me. Sometimes I'm like, a different person, is it believable? Does it feel like I lived it? That's another thing too. Sometimes there's nothing that I hate more than just like disingenuous writing. Anyway, yeah, I could go on forever here. I think I put in the chat, Anne Lamott said in Bird by Bird, she has this essay called Shitty First Drafts, and she talks about 3 drafts: the down draft, the up draft, and the dental draft. And the down draft, get it down; the up draft, fix it up; and then the dental draft, check every tooth. And you can get a lot done in that updraft, but if you really, or at least in a case like in my case, if I really think a song has legs, then I'll do the dental draft. And with that, it's like everything. It's like eliminating unnecessary words. How many of us, we agonize over like, I can speak for myself, is this going to be and, or is this going to be but? And then I end up taking it out anyway. But, just, cause, though, in, at, on, of, all of those words.
Or when you sing it, you subconsciously change it to what you didn't want anyway. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, yeah. Good discussion.
Yeah, no, Adam, that's awesome. So to that point, there are words that don't carry meaning in what you write. And we're going to talk about that in one of the workshops we have coming up about matching lyrical rhythm, because the way that you match melody to lyric, it matters what words get the downbeats, right?
Yeah,
like
I was just going to say that. Yeah, totally.
there's words that carry meaning, and those should be accented. The words like the, and, but, pronouns, those do not carry meaning. Those are just words that connect the words that have meaning. So we'll talk more about that as well. But Adam, that's a good point. Like sometimes you have to, like I've heard people say you can't use the word just in a song. Like I just don't know. They say you should say I don't know.
Yeah, it's a lazy word. Just and like Yeah.
It can be, but sometimes
know, I
that's just the way. See there, I just used it. That's just the way that people say it. That's the way it there it I leave it in sometimes because that's how I would have said it. And some people would argue that I should leave it out, but
But important words coming on the beat, just to that point, Chad. There, yeah, that's like nails on a chalkboard to me. If like
Mhm.
unimportant words are on the beat, you put your verbs on the beat. Wow, they mean
yes.
so much more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have nouns and verbs that are on the strong beats, that carries more meaning than if you have a weird accented word. Um, like your prepositions, like the ins, the outs, the whens, the whats, like those words they don't mean anything, so they shouldn't get a spotlight. And that's like next level songwriting, right? Like being able to sense where that's happening takes time and practice. So we're going to do a whole workshop on practicing how do you match your lyrical rhythms so you're not putting the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, right? Like that's always the famous saying. I'm going to put in the chat the link to the spreadsheet that we have too, where people can contact each other and add your contact information, so then you can co-write or run songs past each other. And then all of you should have access to that, so you can add your information and see other people's information as well. Han says John Mayer talks about using the tools to kind of help your inspiration. Absolutely. Yeah. If you have the inspiration, the craft is what sort of gets it over the finish line once you get there. Any other thoughts or anything to share with the group at this point?
I just want to say thank you, Chad, for reminding everybody that we do have that spreadsheet that they can add their names for possible collaboration, because we have some new members today. And I'm not so I guess when you email it, everybody that attended the meeting today will receive it, or how does it work?
For the recording, or what do you mean?
No, the spreadsheet for possible collaboration.
Oh, I just put it in the chat actually.
Yeah.
So you have it there, but I can definitely email it to everybody that attended today as well.
Fantastic.
But yeah, so for the new people, I think the value from these workshops are coming over time, because you'll hear repetition on the things that I'm always telling you guys, like contrast, prosody, who, when, where, why, what, like all of that stuff, like that never changes. You're going to hear it over and over again. But then we can explore other songs, and we can explore kind of how you're using it, and I'm always learning too, and it's always a good reminder, because sometimes I lose my way and kind of go back to bad habits too. Jay, you have your hand raised.
Thanks, Chad. This is a little bit off topic. I know you were talking about going into a small production workshop, and as I'm transitioning over to OS X and installing stuff, I came across something called an IAC driver. So if you're able to cover that within that, because I can't find a YouTube video on that anywhere of use. So I'd really appreciate it, because I really don't know what that's for MIDI or how that works. So
I have no idea what that is. So
oh, well, one less thing.
Yeah, probably the wrong person to ask there.
All right. Well, thanks anyway.
But yeah, any other questions or thoughts from anybody? What are you guys working on? What are some of the things that you've been writing? Ron.
Yeah, I'm forteing in Christian music, so I'm trying to write and produce contemporary Christian lyrics, kind of pop style. So pop is like really the type of music I like. I've just finished one. I'm ready to start putting it into production at this point. And I've got a whole lot more in the pipeline that I've started and had to walk away because I hit roadblocks.
Yeah. Somebody says Sadia is working on Lana Del Rey inspired song. That's cool. Adam says he's working on sad songs. Rayra says that too. Is it Rosale or Rosale, having writing nightmare, so many ideas and lyrics and melodies, but due to heavy work commitments, time really gets stuck, or time getting stuck until it's Christmas. Totally understand the time thing. I have a corporate day job just like everybody else, and you just kind of have to learn. I've learned to write pretty quickly. Trying to write as fast as I can and just get something down every day. And then you can always take those little bits of time and sort of that adds up over time too. Even if you're taking 5 minutes to write like just an idea, or maybe you free write for 5 minutes about a topic, and then, the next day take another 5 minutes and, do all that stuff. It adds up over time. Says it's, so inspiring today. Awesome. Adam says he actually feels like if he smiles while he writes sad songs, they won't be sad enough. Interesting.
That was a response to something in the chat. I didn't just
Got
say
it.
that randomly.
Hey, Adam, they don't know that you're smiling. You're still writing tragedy, but you
No,
smile.
you gotta cry. I saw an interview with Babyface when I was a kid, and he was like, "I cry when I write sad songs," and I'm like, "Yes." There
That's
it is.
funny. Dale says writing and creating songs, already had a great experience co-writing with another person from the group. Awesome. That's cool.
Oh.
Writing as much as possible. Always interested in co-writing with others. Yeah, that's the thing, guys. Like with that list, people are just, I think, shy by nature. So if you do want to connect outside of these, just reach out to someone and say, hey, I saw your information on the at-home songwriting spreadsheet. Are you interested in connecting? Really just take it very casually and see if you even connect on a personal level, because I think that's really important when you're co-writing, because co-writing is I think it's an intimate thing. And I have to feel really comfortable with someone. And like, I'm not the person who can just go in with anybody and kind of write something. I kind of have to like vibe with someone a little bit before we even start writing, if that makes sense.
Right.
Awesome. Well, I have so much fun doing these, so I appreciate you guys, coming. The next workshop is actually on Tuesday, which we're going to go over modes, and where we're going to talk about how to think about modes. We're going to try to break it down into songwriter level use of modes. Emily, you could probably teach more about modes on the classical level, but really just talking about the very basics that you can use to maybe explore some different ways to use it in your songwriting, because I do think it opens up a lot of different musical colors that can help you communicate. So awesome. Any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
Just wanted to say thank you, Shad. You're always so awesome, like bringing so much insights to everyone here. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you guys for coming. Like this is fun. Like I said, sometimes I just want to go on Zoom and be like, who wants to hang out? So maybe we'll try that one of these days. So awesome. Well, everybody have a great weekend. For those of us in the upper Midwest, we have to stay warm. Pierre, you stay warm and you're -6 in Winnipeg right now. So awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Again, if you know other songwriters that might be interested in the group, definitely tell them about the YouTube channel, tell them about the meetup group, and hopefully if you're new today, hopefully you'll come back and see what else we have to talk about too. So I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad.
Bye-bye.